pull open any version, and it's going to stay in those neuter pronouns, and it's going to be he, and you're in your head, you're like, okay, who now touched who, when, Daniel, what? And I'm with you. So let's answer this question. Now, the typical approach would be to grammatically go back and find the subject of the text, which in this case would make a person think, okay, it could possibly be the glorious man figure. And then in verse 11, that the he that starts talking to Daniel would have us connect that he back to the antecedent, which would still be the glorious man. But this causes a lot of theological problems, because in verse 13 it says that the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood him, meaning that the one who is talking to Daniel was trying to get to Daniel sooner, but that the prince of Persia prevented him from doing it for 3 weeks. And the only way that he was able to get loose was when Michael showed up and helped him. What this does is that it demonstrates that the he, or the me in this passage right here, is weaker than the prince of Persia. Now, trying to mentally track on all this can be difficult. But for now is that we know that there are at minimum 2 heavenly figures here in the scene. And in verse 21, the mystery figure reiterates that only Michael came to his aid. Now, because of these descriptions of Michael in verses 13 and 21, but namely 21's statement that Michael is called Daniel's, or really Israel's prince, is that Jehovah's Witnesses and Seventh-day Adventists will say that Michael is the glorious man, who, from the New Testament, we know is Jesus. Now, the difference between those 2 groups is that Jehovah's Witnesses will not say that Jesus is God, big G, while Seventh-day Adventists will still maintain that he is God, the eternal God, and the doctrine of the Trinity. But how both of them still equate Jesus with Michael is done with a similar path, just a little bit of a different interpretation of who Jesus ultimately is. Both lines of argument would point to Daniel 12:1, where Michael is called the great prince that fights for Israel at the end of days. The key word here is prince. Then they would likely ask you, well, who's the prince in Isaiah 9:6 that's called the Prince of Peace? And you would probably answer, Jesus. And they would smile here a little bit and then take you to Revelation 12:7, where it says that Michael and his angels are fighting against Satan, and then question you about Christ's return, and then say when he comes back, he's coming back with angels. And since 1 Thessalonians 4:16 says that the Lord will descend with the voice of an archangel, and Jude 9 calls Michael an archangel, is that they are mentally leading you to connect those dots and say that Jesus is Michael. So what I just demonstrated here was just the simple path that both sides will use, but you can probably see how easily it can be to lead somebody down that connecting dot path and come away with that outcome. I share that because I don't want anybody in here or anyone watching online to get caught off guard by this and possibly come to that same belief. I have a response video to Jehovah's Witnesses online, and with any of my response videos to Jehovah's Witnesses, they all come with handout cards, more or less print, okay, this is what they'll say and this is how I respond back if you ever get into a discussion with them. I know it's tough to kind of keep up with all their arguments, and so I produce materials to kind of help in that. But the one thing that I will say is that in that video is that I don't interact that much with the context of Daniel 12:1 and Revelation 12:7. We'll cover those when we get to there, but for where we are currently at in Daniel is that I am going to point out 3 statements in Daniel that neither side will bring up because it really undermines this belief. First is in verse 13, where it described Michael as one of the chief princes, meaning that there are multiple chief princes. That'd be like me saying that Matt is one of the elders in the church. So the question is Jesus the first amongst equals? A loud answer should be no. No, Jesus is not. He's above all. And back in chapter 8, the goat's little horn was described magnifying himself to the Prince of Princes. In 8:25, that is in reference to God, as 8:11's Prince of the Host is the same wording found in Joshua 5. That connects back to the burning bush scene with the angel of the Yahweh who says, I am God, I am Yahweh, I am who I am. In chapter 8, the goat's little horn, just to note is that there's a distinction here. It's a difference between the little horn that we were talking about last week in chapter 7. They are not the same figure. This goat little horn is from Greece. That one is from the Fourth Empire. And this goat's little horn was ultimately fulfilled with Antiochus Epiphanes during the Maccabean revolt period, calling himself God manifested, even on minted coins. So just comparing Michael in 1013 to the Prince of Princes in 825 is that you can clearly see that he is of lesser rank than God. And the third verse is Daniel 12:5 that says that there was an angel on each side of the Tigris River that was standing on the banks, while the glorious man was standing, or you could say walking on, water on the Tigris. So what we now know is that there are actually 3 heavenly figures here with Daniel and not just 2. So the mental picture needs to incorporate one more angel, and with that is that the text then drives us to the fact that Michael is standing on the other side of the river after helping the unnamed angel get away from the prince of Persia, thus showing a clear distinction between Michael and the glorious man, i.e. Jesus.
Reminder, hit the subscribe button below, turn on the notification bell, hit the like button, and leave a comment. And don't forget to visit us at justscripture.org. And in the meantime, stay salty.